Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
No question about it. Brad is in charge. He is in charge here today's broadcast of USA Prepares on GCN. No question about it. He is engineering today, and he's doing a fabulous job, as always. And I just love broadcasting with our engineer, Brad. He's always bright, and whatever vitamins he takes, I suggest we all take them. He's just always cheerful and happy. Any comments, Brad?
I don't take any vitamins, actually.
Okay, so all right, so everyone stop taking vitamins.
Yeah, that's the
plan. Brad, thanks so much for being with us. And you've got Guineith Isaacs live in Australia, don't you?
I sure do.
Yeah. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
I'm doing really, really well. And, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, Guineith, is in Australia, you live off the grid, and you've mentioned that many times here on the air. So overnight, you run out of electrical energy. You're out of it. And you've got to wait till the sun comes up and starts generating more. At what time in the morning do you have enough energy to actually do whatever the first thing you use electricity for? What time does that happen?
It depends on the time of year. Usually around about an hour after first light.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it's not so bad.
Mm-hmm. And you don't make a lot of electricity early in the morning. What happens, I'm sure, as it does here on our farm, we start making it around a little after first light. And it's just a small amount of watts, maybe 50 watts, and then maybe 100, and then 700. And it keeps ramping up and up and up. And when the sun is directly over the solar panels is when we make the most electricity, assuming it's not cloudy. And then as the day progresses, we start making less and less and less per hour. So there's, maybe a 5-hour window or so where we're actually making enough electricity to do all the things that we'd like to do. But and then storing it is tough. I mean, storing it is, keeping it in the batteries, and it's hard to have enough battery bank to last throughout the night. And things like refrigeration. If you want to run a dishwasher and you want to run your washing machine at night, and you want to run, let's say you want to sprinkle the garden with the well, if you've got an electric pump. All those things draw a lot of electricity, and you can't do that whenever you darn well feel like it. You've got to space those activities out so when you do have enough sun, you use the electricity while the sun is shining, because it's hard to store it. But then you can't use so much that you don't charge the batteries. So it's an art of balancing sunlight, electric consumption, storage, and that's what I'm teaching our family about. And every day, I teach them about how many watts the newest device uses, whatever it may be, and how that fits into the scheme. And they've got it pretty well understood. But this is a kind of a new thing. It's not like you have an infinite supply of electricity, right, Guineith? You've got to ration it too.
That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the electricity that we do have, we never have to pay for it. That's the advantage.
Yes, and it's I don't think it's. If you look at it, I know that there are a number of people who are saying, I'm going to go off grid and I'm going to save a lot of money. The answer is I don't think so. I don't think you're going to be able to save as much money as you think you can save by going off grid. What you really get is independence, and that's what I'm interested in doing. I was talking to one of our instructors, and I said, we're working on it, and we've been out of debt since the 1980s. So we haven't had any debt. But, you know, to not have any debt, you have to live within your means. Actually, you have to live below your means. And so not having debt's a good thing. And we only got a couple more items to cross off the payment list, and they are insurance. You know, insurance is something that keeps chasing us, and it keeps draining our wallets. And I hate the thought of insurance, because if you think about all the money people have paid over the years into insurance, it's astronomical. So, for example, if you have a mortgage and you have less than 20% down on your house in the United States, you're required to buy PMI, private mortgage insurance, in case, you know, you stop paying. So you're paying an insurance company, and that's one kind of insurance. And there's homeowners insurance, and then there's flood insurance, and then there's, you know, automobile insurance, and the list goes. And then for example, in our farm, some people would have cattle insurance, you know, in case cows walk off and or die. We don't have that. There's you know, we have a barn, and our barn is insured, and that's great. But nothing in the barn is insured. So if we want to insure our tractors, that's extra for each tractor, and we have to list them separately, so they're separate riders. So I would love to give heave-ho to the insurance bills that we have. And then the last one, other than insurance, is taxes, and I'd love to give heave-ho to that. So that's the plan, is to ultimately dump that too, and that's a little tougher nut to crack. But I wanted to share those thoughts with you. And you've gotten many of the same kind of plans, right?
Well, with me, with regards to the taxes, I've come to a realization that taxation is theft, and I don't think I would recommend everybody doing this, but to realize that the person or the organization that you are paying taxes to are a private corporation, and they're not a government. There is no such thing as government in Australia, and in fact in the United States. And if you point this out to them in writing and state that therefore they have no right to demand that you pay them a whole bunch of money without your consent, you simply refuse to do so, as long as you remain peaceful, non-violent, they might take you to court. But if you stand your ground and stay peaceful, stay non-violent, then ultimately they haven't got anything to do against you, because, you know, that's it's something where if you contract without consent, okay, that's called extortion, and extortion's a crime, whether it's done by an individual or a body corporate, and especially a body corporate posing as government. That's called treason. Okay? If you pretend to be a governing body and you're actually a corporate body, you can't be both. You have to be one or the other. And if you are somebody who is saying that you are a corporation and yet you are government, well, that's called fascism. That's what the real definition of fascism is. It's the merger of state and corporate power. I don't see any of these Antifa ratbags getting upset about that. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not politically correct to do so. Sorry, I forgot.
Guineith, we've got David. We've got David on the line. David, you'd like to talk about solar energy?
Well, yeah. Out here in San Francisco, I work on energy issues. So I heard her describing that she only uses solar, and I'm just wondering why she doesn't use, backup of wind power. There are many designs nowadays that are not, swirling blades, and in fact, they've got some artistic designs. There are federal buildings nowadays that have these kind of flapping. They almost look like artwork hanging on the side of the building, and they're basically just a back and forth seesaw. and they produce electricity. So you can do a sort of I'll say a carpet of flapping mirror. They're not even mirrors; they're just panels of metal that flap back and forth and produce electricity
David,
through the wind. Yeah.
I've got a short answer, and then I'd love to hear what Guineith has to say. I've jumped into the solar arena because I want to be independent. That's the main thing. I don't trust the grid. I don't trust the boards of directors of these corporations that are generating electricity and delivering electricity for profit. I don't think they have our best interests in their minds. I think that it's all about money. I've seen it. I've run for the board of directors twice, and I have been stomped, by people who are, I'd like to say stupid. I'm going to say ignorant of the facts. They're willing to elect or select people who really don't have their interests at heart. And so I've jumped in. But I got to tell you, it's not inexpensive. It can take 20 years worth of vacation money, not going to Disney and other places and ball games, 20 years worth of that for a family to put in a solar array with a battery bank and an inverter. So one of the reasons that not everybody's jumping into it, one, it takes work. 2, you have to pay attention to it. 3, you have to maintain it. 4, it takes money. And the big one, I think, is money. Guineith, do you have a comment?
Okay, actually, we do have a wind generator. It was hooked up to the same charge controller as our solar power until it blew out the charge controller. I learned after that you had to have the wind generator hooked up to its own charge controller, hooked up to the same battery bank. Okay? I have yet to purchase a new charge controller for the wind generator, and until then, it's not connected.
Sure, it's probably a surge
and so
thing,
the brakes
right?
are on it. The charge controller for the wind generator is on the shopping list. It's likely to cost between $50 and $100.
David, would you stay with us, please?
Oh, sure, thanks.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about your thoughts on the technology. David in San Francisco, Guineith Isaacs is with us. Guineith, thank you so much for sitting in for me yesterday. I had an appointment that I absolutely had to attend, and I want to thank all of our class and our instructors, including Sharon, who was worried about me, who were worried about me, and I just had to take that time and make that appointment. So doing fine here. So those of you who are concerned, all is fine here in Missouri at the farm. So David, you were talking about combining wind power with solar power, and can you give us and you're in the business, right? Is that
No,
correct?
No. I actually work with a nonprofit that's been working on not only anti-nuclear, but as well switching over, converting to alternative energy. And I tend to work on the economics of it. And first of all, I just before you closed out the end of that last segment, you were talking about getting off the grid and trying to get on the board of, was that one of your local power companies?
Yeah, I ran for the board of directors twice, 3 years ago, and I just got off stage in the end of August, and I was beaten very, very solidly by a guy who said, I'm from around here, my mama's from around here, I was born here, I'm from around here, appreciate your vote, thank you very much. Well, yeah.
Right.
I take it he was local.
He was local. Literally, he beat me twice. And with that same line. These guys are entrenched. I believe they are manipulated by the corporation that they are directors of. They are told that they will They will stand in harmony and unity, and they will toe the company line. Whatever the board decides, there will be no dissension outside the boardroom. And they sign a contract to that effect.
Which state are you in?
I'm in the state of corruption, Missouri.
Oh, okay, yeah, right. I'm originally from St. Louis, being out here in California now. Out here in California, PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric, has been busted any number of times in not just money laundering operations, but embezzlement, failure to properly spend money. In fact, there's a famous incident in which one of their gas lines exploded, blew up 11 houses, and killed a bunch of people. And they basically claimed that their pipe was intact and in good service, but in fact they had put in a defective piece of pipe in 1954. So this was, 50-something years this defective piece of pipe had been in, and they claimed that they inspected it every year, but since they knew it was defective, they didn't inspect it for 50 years, but they pocketed the money. So they embezzled money based upon knowing that they put in defective pipe. So that was like 50 years worth of embezzlement and failure to inspect. And the way they had laid the pipe, it had gone through a long, skinny valley, and that valley had been used as a landfill, a city dump for, maybe 100 years. And that city dump had basically, it sagged, it compacted, and so the pipe laid across the top of it sank. And since they weren't inspecting that pipe for 50 years, they, basically allowed that pipe to subside. And when it subsided, then it blew up. And the idea that they fought it every bit of the way. They knew that it was defective to begin with and embezzled for 50 years. So they committed a fraud, a basic murder, negligence, any number of different real crimes, not just embezzlement, financial crimes, but, murder, negligent homicide. The idea that a company like PG&E, which is, used to be a top blue chip sort of stock, has been seen as something like a money laundering organized crime organization, and they run nuclear power plants. And now they're trying to put nuclear power waste down at sea level, right on a beach at their place. So, yeah, there are a lot of real problems and reasons for getting off the grid, but I was going to raise the issue of disasters like Houston, Florida, and Puerto Rico.
Okay. Hold that thought. I'm sure Guineith would also like to hear them. Hold that thought. David, hang with us, please. Guineith Isaacs is live in Australia with us. David is in San Francisco. He's called in. And David, you were talking about disasters. I'm sure we'd love to hear your thoughts on what's happened in Houston, what's happened in Florida, what's happening in Puerto Rico, and what has happened in Puerto Rico. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, obviously, local preparation. I heard you mention that you're basically opposed to the grid. I think it's certainly a smart idea.
I'm not opposed to the grid. I'm opposed to people who are ignorant managing the grid. I'm opposed. Sure, yeah. I think the grid is a great idea. The first time I ran for the board of directors, I talked. My platform was protecting our grid. Okay. I pulled out of my pocket a 5.56, some people might call it a 223 cartridge, and I said, I think I paid about 20 cents for this, and someone from a couple hundred yards away could take one of these or a larger caliber and could plink and hit a specific portion of a substation, and I didn't exactly say what, but I said, if a transformer's taken out with just one of these 20-cent cartridges, there are no replacements for those one-of-a-kind transformers, and it could take years for another one to be constructed. So we need to protect our grid. That I said 3 years ago. And then this time, I was greeting people who were coming into the to register for the election and the annual board of directors meeting, of which there were thousands of people in the convention hall. One guy said, "Did you bring your bullet with you?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, that was idiotic." And I said, well, "Why do you say that?" And he said, "Well, that's it, just idiotic." And I said, "Well, actually, I reviewed that before I mentioned it with the engineer, the chief engineer of the electric cooperative." And he said, "I'm absolutely right." And he said, "Well, it's idiotic." And I said, "Well, I can't help it if you don't understand." Now, who was he? He was the husband, dressed to the nines, of one of the gals who was running for re-election. And she was reelected both nights, 3 years ago and this latest time in August. So what I'm saying is I'm not against the grid. I love the idea of the grid. You know, it almost self-healing in some respects. However, we need to protect it. And we have people who are ignorant of the facts at the highest levels of corporate governance making decisions. That's the problem.
Well, I agree. And, you know, I've been working in this since about 1996, and Enron was created, the deregulation of electricity in California was created in 96 over the opposition of Ralph Nader and a bunch of different organizations. And your example is actually not only true, but it's one of the scandals of Enron was they convinced PG&E and Southern California Edison and a bunch of other major power companies to intentionally destroy their supplies. So you mentioned if you knocked out one piece, you'd have to wait for replacement. Well, Enron, Southern California Edison, PG&E disposed of, they auctioned off all of those replacement parts, and they were sitting idle, sitting empty, empty shelves. When any part went out, then they were able to jack up prices from 8 cents a kilowatt hour to $1,000 a kilowatt hour, and it basically destroyed, many businesses. I think 2/3 of the businesses in San Diego went out in 1 year because of this fraud, and that was what led to the public power, corruption scandal, or not public power, but the power corruption scandal of Enron, and then led to the Arthur Andersen scandal of about the year 2000. But the idea of intentionally sabotaging themselves by destroying their backup parts was a major part of that corruption. And in my eyes, organized crime has made their way onto the boards of directors of many of the power companies, because what it comes down to is it's an opportunity to do money laundering. You know, if you can imagine billing yourself for inspecting a pipe for 50 years, and you pocket that money, you never inspect it, you know it was a defective part to begin with, they're able to basically print money simply by making a claim, never having any inspectors, and billing themselves as if they do. So it's the grid is a good idea, but it's also good to have independent. And one of the things that if you look at just economics 101, they diversify your income. So if you look at electricity as income, if you have one nuclear power plant and nothing else, one of the problems with the 1991 energy crisis, or not 1991, 1999 energy crisis was that a 40-ton crane collapsed in a nuclear power plant down in Southern California and knocked the power out, and then all of a sudden that started the rolling brownouts, which led to Dick Cheney and Enron making magnificent amounts of money. I think they said that they looted California of $71 billion in a matter of months. And $71 billion in a matter of months. We've never recouped the spending power of that $71 billion. And so, these guys are organized crime. They're any number of different types of sabotage and corruption. And so to have independent producers of electricity, a farm, a school district. We've got BART up here, the electric train that runs all over the Bay Area, and they've got right away, all over the side of the tracks. They could be laying solar panels up and down the side of the tracks, and not only producing for themselves, but producing for every town around, and giving huge competition to PG&E. But the board of directors is stifled for some reason. They're not. You would think that Homeland Security would give grants to create alternative power because it would be such a stabilizing force. So then, when you
David,
well, I was just going to say.
I want to put an exclamation. I'd like to put an exclamation point on what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
During the 2 minutes that they allowed me, they only allowed me to speak 2 minutes. I took 4 minutes and like 40 seconds. But they had an attorney who was standing right next to me, ready to yank me off stage. And so I'm applying for this job on the board of directors, and they're allowing me 2 minutes to make my case. And I said, it's unbelievable. You hire a secretary, and you spend hours, right? You spend a lot more time interviewing a secretary, or the guy who's going to cut the lawn, at the electric cooperative, or the shop foreman. You're not going to hire that person in 2 minutes. However, you're only allowing each of us on stage 2 minutes to make our point, make our case as to why we should be a member of the board. Okay, so that's one thing. Another thing that I said was exactly what you're talking about, and I said, I have a plan to reduce electric rates. We're paying 5.1 cents per kilowatt hour, and then we're selling it for 10 cents a kilowatt hour, plus meter fees. I said, my plan is, should there be an EMP, should there be a grid down situation, my plan is to cut us out from the grid, isolate us through switches. We isolate our little electric cooperative, but before then, what we do is we encourage people to have solar panels and sell the excess electricity back to the electric cooperative at 2 cents per kilowatt and still sell it at 10 cents. So it's a win for everybody. It works for everybody. And I said, now we're not going to have the same amount of electricity. There's no way, a bunch of farmers with solar panels are going to provide all the electricity we need. However, we'll have more than we would have if we didn't have any. And they wouldn't let me get my point across. So I'm with you. I'm on the same page. And what I'm saying is this whole system of the electric companies, I believe, these utility companies, is designed to control us and to prevent the independence, whether it be independence from small farmers like myself having excess capacity and selling it back to the electric cooperatives, or independence in the boardroom. They don't want any independence of any kind. They want absolute dependence from all of us.
That's why I believe it's organized crime. These guys have been able to launder money through PG&E for years. They've been laundering money through Southern California Edison. If you just study, it's called San Bruno, where that mountain or where that pipeline blew up. San Bruno, the town of San Bruno. And when you study the case, you realize that the PUC, Public Utilities Commission head, who was the head of Southern California Edison, had a secret meeting. He had to go to Prague, Poland, he went to Poland, basically, to do a secret meeting with the Enron people in order to do a corruption of this San Bruno pipeline. I said Enron with PG&E. So this guy was in corruption. They ended up paying a fine of $2 billion for this pipeline explosion after they had discovered layers on layers on layers of fraud, not cutting back tree branches and allowing whole neighborhoods to burn down, and pocketing the money, claiming that they had...
Yeah, did anybody go to jail or prison?
I think only one person. And
that's not enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there were just layers and layers and layers of the corruption. I mean, the inspectors had to have signed off on these things. California's got some real problems with, that's why I believe it's more organized crime than it is, just sort of an internal corruption of a single company. Because when you get into Dick Cheney, they basically, after 9/11, they made the grid a part of national security. So they've basically taken a company like PG&E, which has what I see as organized crime ties, and then given them national security clearance and national security kinds of controls. So, if they claim that they're paying security guards, $100 an hour to guard a nuclear power plant, they're probably pocketing that money, too.
I'd love to hear what Guineith has to say about this when we come back. David, thank you for being with us. If you'd like to stay with us for the last segment of this hour, that'd be wonderful. And David, I do have your phone number, and I will call you sometime this evening if that's okay. Well, Guineith, it's back to you and me. David is making some calls to get some more information to us about the electric utilities, the corruption, the crime, the money laundering, and so forth. And he's going to join us on the air in the future. So I'm delighted to have welcomed him to broadcast with us and teach us more about the corruption as he sees it. So, Guineith, we were talking about your solar energy experience. Anything you want to share about what David was talking about, or what we were talking about before we go on to being forced into the Stone Age, and, by these?
Yeah, if we get a few nuclear power plants going off, we might be back in the Stone Age. David's comments about California utilities. I graduated from the University of Melbourne in 1999 with a degree in environmental science and geography. Okay, it was not a useless degree. It has proved over the years immensely useful. I learnt about utilities internationally, especially in California, because if I had chosen to go out and actually use my degree, I might have been an environmental consultant advising on utilities internationally. Helping people to put together solar projects of a massive scale and such like. The case study for corrupt utilities was California. When I was studying environmental science at the University of Melbourne, especially Enron. I'm not sure if Enron had gone broke at that time or not, but there were already, in 1997, 1998, red flags being raised in the academic world regarding Enron's behavior. And basically what they were doing was they were rehypothecating electricity. Don't you dare! We've got a puppy wanting to jump up on the bench and get the butter. No. Okay. That is, this has been an issue for a while for the poor old Californians. And you know something? It tends to happen when you elect socialists, which Californians have once again been doing for quite a while. Because Maggie Thatcher put it better than anyone that I've heard. She said the problem with socialism is that sooner or later you run out of other people's money.
Yeah, right.
And that's a quote. Mm-hmm. And she was, of course, a shopkeeper. She was conservative, which means if she was in America, she would have been a Republican on the right wing of the political spectrum. For the listening audience out there, it's a mistake to assume that a conservative equals fascist. That is absolutely not true. And people need to break out of this naivety, or this is something else that could end up driving us towards the Stone Age. And if you don't believe me, have a look at North Korea, okay? Have a look at Venezuela. Socialism is more destructive than just about any other political philosophy. It is a political philosophy that seems to be designed to wreck societies. And, I can't think of any country that has had a socialist government for more than about 10 or 20 years that is actually prosperous with, people actually happy, able to set up businesses, able to run things, able to have a generally happy and prosperous future. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah. Hold that thought. Guineith and I will be right back after top of the hour news and commercial announcements. I'm Ben Finelli. Everyone all set? Yeah? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Guineith Isaacs is with us. And originally, we were going to talk about life in the Stone Age, with Stone Age tools. Why? Because there are a lot of disasters happening. There's a lot of, I think some of them are engineered. And if you look at Texas, if you look at Florida, if you look at Puerto Rico, we've been talking about these things. By the way, gasoline in the corrupt state of Missouri is about $2.50 a gallon for unleaded regular. Before the storms, we were looking at around $2, maybe $2.09. So gasoline has gone up about 20 to 25%. Diesel is now about $2.59 in Missouri. Used to be able to get it for about $2.20. So it has gone up as well. And I have a feeling that the things that we talked about in this broadcast, materials going up because of supply shortages, I think we're going to see that as well when people figure out that they need plywood to rebuild their homes, and OSB, oriented strand board, and 2x4 6s and 2x8s and 2x10s and 2x12s and concrete blocks and concrete sand, cement, mortar, tools, appliances, kitchen cabinets, sheetrock screws, nails, mud. The list goes on and on. All those lawnmowers that are destroyed from being flooded, all those cars whose interiors have been destroyed, and the transmissions and the engines and the rear drive train and the constant velocity joints, and on and on and on. All the damage because of the storms. And now, of course, it's great for the economy because we're going to be buying all new stuff. But where does all that old stuff go? Do we just throw it in the landfills? What do we do with all that? Do we recycle all those cars? Do we pawn them off on unsuspecting buyers? Is that what we do? Take a flooded car and say, no, this is low mileage. This is a cream puff. Is that what we do? And then the insurance companies, what are they going to do with all these claims? I have a feeling they're going to try to escape as much of the payouts as possible. I also think that they're going to raise the rates for those who are still insured. And that's what they did to me at the farm. Our insurance rates on our farm policy went up maybe 50% in just a couple of years. And they said, it's because of Joplin. We had a tornado in Joplin, and because of that, Joplin, Missouri, that our insurance on our farm went up dramatically. And I said, is our farm in Joplin? Because I didn't think it was.
No, it's in the
And they said, no, but
that's good enough for them.
Yeah, and the state allows them to raise the insurance rates for those who have not have damage, because we get to pay for all those claims in Joplin. I just despise insurance companies. I think it's organized crime. I really believe it is.
Racketeering?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So
it's funny how I'm making a joke here. It's funny how Italians are so quick to pick up on those sorts of behavioural patterns.
Yeah.
I've been dealing with them for a while.
Yeah. And well,
if you go back in history, okay, 2,000 years, even I was watching a YouTube video the other day And you know what this YouTube video was saying, that they'd actually done a historical and archaeological investigation of this particular place that had been utterly devastated 3,000 years ago in the Middle East. And guess what conclusion they came to? The Sicilians had been there. And I heard that, and I did the most massive face plant.
And I got to tell you,
and their friends, the Sardinians, and everybody knows about the Sicilians. They forget the Sardinians are almost as bad.
I was on a long drive. I was on a long drive last night, a couple 100 miles, and I was in the vehicle with our son, and he was telling me about this military guy he knows, and he chats with him, regularly. And this military guy told our son that he's really afraid of me. He's not afraid of our son, who's who competed, took I think third place in Disney's Wide World of Sports, as a karate in fighting. And so this military guy's not afraid of our son. He's afraid of me. And I was talking to him about that last night. And I think what it is I have a reputation of being Italian. And that seems to carry the day, and people are really leery of me because of that. They don't understand who I am or what I'm like, but because I'm of Italian heritage, they want to stay away because they know that I just might go off half-cocked, and they may be found, not found. They may just disappear, and that's the concern, really. And, the reputation I have is that I would go and do these hits on the East Coast. Then I'd come back to Missouri, wait till it cooled down, then I'd go back to business on the East Coast again. So I'd be a traveling hitman. And that's the reputation that I somehow have gotten. Okay, that's all right with me because, it keeps people away from our farm. It keeps them from not stealing our animals. And I ran into one guy at the end of our road, and he was checking out a cow and a calf, and he saw this little calf, and it was maybe 200 pounds. So he was looking at putting that calf that was just born in his truck and driving off with it. That was my impression. And so my son approached him, and I approached him, and he looked at me and he goes, "I've heard about you. You're the one who kills people." And so I've never met this guy before. He's from, I don't know, maybe 20, 25 miles away. Never seen him. And he's heard about me. He knows that I'm the one in his mind. He thinks I kill people. So, that's the reputation I have. Obviously, I'm not going to try to change anyone's mind. If they really think that and it keeps them away, so be it. So be it. I'm okay with that. I'm just not going to try to educate them. But I got to tell you, it prevents me, this reputation I have, prevents me from doing good. And that was one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, Guineith. There's really good news in our message. And that is, we're not going to have to help very many people. We are not. Because there are so many people who don't get it, who are not interested, who are willing to go to ball games and get distracted by all kinds of minutiae, that we're not going to have to help them. I was chatting with one of our instructors who has a cell phone, and I don't know, the phone just dials someone. Does that happen to you? Okay. We've lost Guineith. But anyway, let me tell you the story, class. So I was on the phone. I got a call from one of our instructors, and she's going to come back on the air with us in the next several weeks. And she was telling me that she bought some property. And, okay, do we have Guineith back? Okay.
Yes, back
so
here now.
Guineith, I was telling you a story about...
I'm back now. I missed whatever you said in the last few minutes. I must have laughed too hard and I got cut off.
let me bring you up to speed. I got a call from one of our instructors who dialed me accidentally. They call it butt dialing. here in the States. And she called and said, "Did you call?" And we called her back because she butt dialed and she wasn't there, so she called me back. But anyway, we were talking about preparedness-minded people, and so she bought this farm. And the farm is roughly a quarter of a mile by a quarter of a mile, a square. So it's about 40 acres. And she put in some infrastructure. She spent a lot of money getting this farm in shape. She built buildings, and she put in an area where people could bring in their RVs and live there. So they had a waste system. They had water. They had electricity. They had all kinds of things on this farm. And she was looking for an individual or a couple who would, she travels a lot, so she was looking for a couple who would, or an individual who would be like caretakers, mow the lawn around the main cabin, those kinds of things, check the fence, make sure everything was operational. Not a lot of work. And in turn, whoever was the caretaker or caretakers would get to live there for free. No taxes, no utility bills. Get to live a quarter of a mile by a quarter of a mile. Yep. Okay. So it was really kind of a simple thing. She couldn't find anyone, not a single person, who would be willing to do that, live for free on her farm. Nobody. And, it's not like it would take 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Maybe one day a week would be spent cutting the lawn. Maybe another day, a different week, would be spent checking the fence. That kind of thing. It was not a big deal. Yeah. There's only 5 acres of fencing, just 5 acres of area that would be manicured. She would provide the mower, the fuel, all that. No one was interested in helping her. So the point I'm trying to make is our lives are going to be a little more simple than we think they're going to be when there's a collapse, because we don't have to help people, because they're not willing to participate now. I first thought it was 5% of us. When I first started talking about this, I said there's 5% of us. Revised my number downward to 3%. Revised it downward to 1%. Now I think it's 1 in 1,000. So let's talk about the Stone Age and what it's going to be like, after the fall of society. Guineith Isaacs. We'll be right back. Guineith, just as a quick side note, I want to give you a compliment. I got a call over the weekend by Sunny Skidmore, and she's an owner of KLID AM 1340 in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. So that radio station, the one that Sunny Skidmore owns, KLID in Poplar Bluff, Missouri, is an affiliate. What that means is they pick up our broadcast and broadcast it the same day, a little later. And she's assigned us Drive Time, which is their most popular slot, and the best slot that they have. She's given to us, and we've had it for years, and that's because she likes what we do. But she called me this weekend to specifically compliment you, and she said that
that's nice.
You do a great job. Yeah, isn't that nice?
I think you mentioned that in the email, but I was kind of blushing a bit, I think. So I didn't say, thank you or anything. Isn't
that nice?
It's lovely.
Isn't that nice that that she recognizes what you're doing? And then I filled her in a little bit more, and I said, it's pretty darn difficult for Guineith at times, because there are times when, while she's not broadcasting with a computer, I'm sitting in the studio and I've got a bunch of computers running and screens, and I've got lights, and I said it's a little different because she's off the grid, and she doesn't have solar power in the middle, at midnight to 2 o'clock in the morning when she's broadcasting with us, her local time. So she's using these solar-powered lights. It's dim, and she just can't run to the computer and power it up because she's out of electricity at that time. And I explained that, and she was really, really impressed with what you've accomplished, how you do it, your breadth of knowledge, your depth of knowledge, your education, and she thinks you're just great. So I just wanted to let you know that comes from a lady who is at the highest level of her game. And why am I saying that? She's not just some gal who owns a radio station. She's been a broadcaster. She's been on the microphone. She's met some of the absolute greatest of the greats in terms of the recording industry. She's met them. They've been at a radio station. I'm talking about the greats, the country western greats. She's been around for decades. So she's seen a lot. And for her to make that compliment is really, really saying something. So I wanted to share that with you. Okay.
Oh, thank
so
you
now,
for that, Vincent. Anyway.
Well.
On to the
and thank you for what you do. Yeah.
Yep. A lot of people have this misconception because of what we're taught in the schools, that we've actually, that we started in a stone age and that we, developed from there. But actually, you might have figured out by now that most of what is taught in our school system is not, in fact, the truth. Most places where you get Stone Age societies, there's evidence that they actually came originally from a much higher level of technology. Like, for instance, the Australian Aborigines, are typically referred to as being a modern Stone Age people, even when they have, like, modern-type technologies. They are capable generally today of going out, if they want to, which often they don't, because usually, they've been unfortunately afflicted by drug addiction, alcohol addiction, gambling addiction. So they're capable of going out and living in the bush for extended periods and surviving in the Australian outback, but often they simply don't want to because it's all too hard. But nevertheless, there's some things about their technology that are absolutely extraordinary and have clearly come from somewhere else. The one I'm primarily thinking of at the moment is the boomerang. And, boomerangs identical to Australian Aboriginal boomerangs have actually been excavated from Egyptian tombs. I don't know if you realise that or not. But there are also, Egyptian tomb paintings of people hunting 3,000 and 4,000 and 5,000 years ago using boomerangs to hunt game in ancient Egypt. And from my research, I tend to believe that the Australian Aborigines descended from, at least the ones in Western Australia, actually descended from the Somalians.
Guineith Isaacs is with us. Guineith, we were talking about the Stone Age, and you were teaching us about, well, some myths that we've been taught really aren't true. Please continue.
Okay, basically, and the pattern through history has tended to go from, being a highly advanced technological empire, and at the end of the cycle, what happens, the empire breaks down, the trade routes go away, and some key commodity that was absolutely vital for, for that society to function goes away because the trade routes go away. You've got, at that stage in history, what tends to happen is rampant highway robbery, which I would say we are at that point now, definitely. The highway robbers, of course, in our case, being the blue team, to the point where it's simply not safe even to use ordinary roads anymore. And societies tend to, at that stage, get more and more and more localized. And also, depending on what part of the world you're in, apparently what is becoming a problem in some parts even of Western Europe is wandering bands of literal Bedouins. That means Muslims. Maybe not from the Bedouin tribe, but with the Bedouin attitude of they see your caravan or they see your vehicle, and they get this idea in their head that their vehicle ought to be, that your vehicle ought to be their vehicle, and then they carjack it. And that is actually happening in Melbourne now. In that case, it is incidentally Somali and African gangs, Sudanese and Somali gangs doing that. Something, we're at that stage, just after that point, it goes into Stone Age. Okay? It's historically, every time in history, we are at the fall of Rome. And after Rome fell, Britain went from being a reasonably sophisticated, nice place to live within just a few years to being Stone Age Britain. Okay? In such a world, it's not the same world. Certain skills that you never thought that you would need become absolutely vital and necessary. One of them is how to make fire from scratch, without lighters, without matches. Okay? Unless you're in a really, really dry place, and unless you've got a high degree of experience, do not attempt to start a fire by rubbing two sticks together, because it just doesn't work unless you have a great deal of skill and have been doing it for a long time and really, 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 really know what you're doing, and you'll wear yourself out. The best way to start a fire easily without the use of lighters and without the use of matches is to use a flint of some description. And probably, unless you have a good flint mine around where you live, the best thing to do is go and buy a supply of commercial camping flints at your camping store now while you are able to, because they do run out eventually, okay? And it's within probably about 2 or 3 hours of just sitting there with a pile of tinder and with a flint and with a knife, you'll be able to figure out how to start a fire pretty well first time every time. It's by far the best way to get a fire started. If you have a little bit more technology, what you can do is you can get by the way, I have used these methods. Other people can use these methods subject to their own research and risk. Okay? I just thought I'd have to put that disclaimer in here. You can start a fire with a battery. Okay?
Yes.
I'll tell you my technique. That this is at the bottom of my list of getting a fire started. So it's one of the last resort methods. You get a 12-volt car battery. You get a set of jumper leads, okay? You get something like a tuna fish can or a sardine can. You pour some gasoline into the tuna fish can, and you put a piece of cotton rag into the gasoline so that the gasoline soaks its way all through the, all through the rag. You do not attempt to spark gasoline. That is a very, very bad idea. But if it's soaked into the rag totally so that there's no puddling of gasoline at the bottom of the tin, that is reasonably, safe, in inverted commas. Okay. What you do is you get the jumper leads on the car battery, and probably best if the car battery is not attached to your car. You spark them very close to the gasoline rag, not on the tin, okay? just near the rag, and the whole thing should erupt immediately into flames. You have a set of pliers handy by. You have your kindling, your tinder, and your large wood all ready to go before you do the sparking. And you can actually do that same method by hooking up a negative wire and a positive wire even to a cell phone battery, and you can spark it from that, okay? But like I said, that is a fire-starting method of last resort. It's probably a really good idea now to go out and buy a bunch of lighters, okay? Ordinary cigarette lighters. Even after they are no longer any good to use as a lighter, you'll find they have a small flint in them, and you may be able to use that flint together with the mechanism to create enough of a spark to get something flammable going. And it may not be, tinder. It may be something like alcohol soaked in a rag or something like that, okay? You need to have creativity, you need to have imagination, you need to learn how to use your wits and think flexibly, okay? And if you can do that, you shouldn't have any problem whatsoever getting a fire of some description started, okay? And when you've got fire, life is just so much easier. The other vital tool, I would say, is an axe of good quality, a metal axe. If you're going back to the Stone Age, it's best not to have to go completely back to the Stone Age where you're having to make a stone axe, okay? The first thing that happens with Stone Age societies and unreached people groups is the first thing that they notice when they see the Westerners come. They don't notice anything else except for the machetes, the knives, and the axes. Okay? As soon as they see the machetes, the knives, and the axes, they want one. Sure. It shows these are kind of important technologies. And pretty soon, within a year or so, the local stone axe manufacturer has gone out of business because everybody's got a metal axe, and that's really, really important for a bunch of reasons. We had our axe break recently. We went back to cutting the wood with the chainsaw and wrecked the blade of the chainsaw within about 3 weeks, simply because the wood that grows around here is called ironbark, and it's called ironbark for a very, very, very good reason. It's so hard. It wrecked the chainsaw blade within 3 or 4 weeks. But I know from past experience, I've used axes here, well, basically since we've gotten here, and we're only on to our third axe in 4 years. So, and it's the handles that tend to go rather than the axes. So actually, probably you could put a new handle onto the existing axe, but I chose to get a new axe this time and think about getting a handle for the other axe later. And I'll do that because the other axe happens to be a block splitter. That's the second technology you should get now. The third technology is one that you need to learn, okay? And that is how to tan skins. And if I had to pick one technology, if I knew that within 10 years which I'm pretty well convinced is going to happen because it's beginning to happen now, that the transport system goes away, the just-in-time delivery system goes away. That means there's no supermarkets. That means that there's no eBay anymore. There's no whatever other online supplier that you have. There's no big box stores. That one technology that would be vital would be tanning, making leather and making furs from the skins of live animals. And if you can do that, you have got a trade. For one thing, you've got a tradable commodity. Furs have always been tradable. And for another thing, you will be warm and you will be clothed. And together with tanning, I would also say, of course, leather tooling and leather working, okay? And you can make any number of tools, clothes, shoes, bags, etc., 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 if you know how to do leather working.
Yeah,
and that is a truly ancient.
Class, if you'd like to find Guineith Isaacs on the internet, just go to USA Prepares, USAPREPARES.com. And there's a link to her on page 1 and also on the instructor's page. And that will take you to her Facebook page. And that will provide you with more information about just exactly who Guineith Isaacs is. And Guineith, we were talking about the Stone Age, and we were talking about the importance of fire, and it absolutely is important. We heat our house with wood, and so do you. We don't go and cut trees that are live. We cut, well, once in a while, if they're in the way, if they've just, they're in a trail that we have that they've just shown up, we might cut little saplings because they're in our way of moving cows and equipment and so forth. Other than that, we just pick up dead trees that have already fallen, and we cut them up and put them into the fire, and we heat our house with that wood, and we heat our hot water with that wood. Yeah. So to us, a fire is very, very important. We do the same thing.
And with the type of forest that we have, yellow box, grey box, a type of Australian eucalyptus, and so is the ironbark tree. And these are the three species that dominate in this forest as the canopy. And the thing with all eucalyptus trees, they all drop branches. The trees in this forest, some of them are many, many, many hundreds of years old. Some of them have been cut down to the stump and have actually reshot from the stump into a tree of considerable dimensions. So that's really handy to know that they will do that. Of course, it's probably not good to do that repeatedly, to cut a tree with a diameter of 1 meter down to the ground and have it regrowing. But they recover and they drop branches. It just means that if there's a high wind, you stay out of the forest, because if you don't, then you might find that something falls on your head, and that something might be of quite a considerable weight. That some of these branches that fall, they're 12 inches in diameter or even greater. That's how big the trees are, and that's just the branch, But it means that, these are the sorts of things. We know this. I'm now used to living in this landscape. I've been here for, this is my 5th year here. You get to know the patterns of the place that you're in. If you're going to do this, you need to get into this landscape now. Another thing that I do, which is what Stone Age peoples all across the world have done, you need to start wildcrafting food. That means growing the food in a very naturalistic kind of way, okay? Aboriginal peoples all over the world, they would get nourishing roots, okay? They would dig up the plant at a certain time of year when the plant is basically dormant, cut off a section of the root and plant back in the ground a section of the root, usually with a piece of root and an eye attached to it, okay? And they would generally say something like a prayer like, please allow me to take of you that I might have food, know you're appreciated and loved. Thank you, God. Thank you, Earth, for providing me with this food. And that was usually women's work. That generally provided the starch staples, and it meant that they could go back to the same place, year after year after year after year. And one thing that I'm doing is actually cultivating known starch staple food that I can cultivate and use in this way, and learn how to hunt, learn how to fish, and learn how to trap, and learn all of these things now, even if it's just on a hobby basis, because one day you will
You're
need
absolutely
these
right.
skills. And that's the end of the broadcast.
It is. And now is the time, while we still have the tools, and while we still have the electricity.
Make your mistakes now.
Yep. Gwyneth, thanks so much.
Yep.
I'll see you next Tuesday.
I'm a survivalist.